Hello and welcome piano enthusiasts. In this video I restored this American-made Weber grand piano from 1923. It's made in New York. This is actually the second Weber grand I've restored. And I have another one that's just a stock piano that's waiting for me to get to it. But this one was for a customer. My customer, he bought it from his piano teacher when he was a teenager, after his teacher bought a Steinway. And he's had it for, I don't want to give his age up, but about a half a century. So rather than, in the past few years he's had a couple tuners come look at it, and you'll hear it in a sec, but it just couldn't be tuned anymore. It's just structurally, it needs a lot of work to just get it working again. So yeah, cover your ears. So he wanted to, rather than just throw it away, he's got I think he's got 11 kids and so many grandchildren, so eventually it'll go to the grandkids. So he just wanted it to stay in the family, rather than just get a new shiny black piano from China or Indonesia or something. So you can hear the pen block is shot, the bass strings are dead. He asked about certain band-aids that could be done just to get it working again, and I showed him those band-aids had already been done. And, like I could flip bass strings, but it really wouldn't matter if the piano won't stay in tune. And I wanted to do another video like this showing more of the rebuilding aspect, because I don't really have a video showing that. So I'll replace the pen block and do some more soundboard repairs. I think I have to lower the plate a little bit in some areas to get the down bearing right. And of course he wanted it refinished. His wife actually kind of repainted it at one point. So yeah, now I'm just going to take the piano apart, and I get my measurements here of the bass strings, and I'll order those from Germany. I get a couple different measurements on each string. And these aren't really, I don't know, a lot of people want me to slow it down and it's too fast. It's not really supposed to be a how-to video. It's just kind of, just, I guess, to show all the work that's involved in restoring a piano, especially an older one like this. And I think, because when I just set up the camera and I get an accurate kind of representation of how long it takes to do each job, like how long does it take to disassemble the piano, how long does it take to refinish the piano or strip the piano, or so after I do so many of these, it's been a big help. It's been a big help, and just being able to accurately quote future jobs that come in. So here I'm just making I pulled the old pen block out, and I'm cutting the new one out of the stock material. And I'll fit it to match that flange there. And sometimes the plate, this big cast iron frame, isn't always straight, so you gotta account for that. So you can get stable tuning, because sometimes if that wooden block isn't securely fit in there, you'll tune one section of the piano, and then a different section will go out of tune as you tune that section. So you gotta be very mindful and making sure that that board is fit in there tightly. So I apply some chalk. Some people use graphite, or there's a lot of different ways to do it. to so I can sand down the high spots. And then I got a little squirrely with my cut here in that that cove there, so I'll just fill that with epoxy. Probably need to get a thinner blade on my bandsaw. And now that I have it cut and fit properly, I'll flip the plate back over and I'll again secure it, and then I'll mark where all the holes are. There's about 220 holes to drill. So it takes a bit of time. So I've just got a center pin punch there. And then I take a little marker and just dab the very center of each hole so I can see it real easily. And while my air compressor's loading up, I'll order, or I'll send out these parts to be duplicated. And now I'll start to drill all the holes in the pin block. And you can see my kind of MacGyvered setup there, but it works. Yeah, and the customer wanted the WNG, stands for Wessel, Nickel, and Gross. The company's been around for over 100 years, but new action parts, they're carbon fiber composite action parts, and the hammer shanks are carbon fiber, carbon composite action components and carbon fiber hammer shanks. So once I get the pin block cut and drilled, then I'll just coat it with a coat of shellac. And then I'll take the legs off, take all the brass hardware off, like the pedals and the hinges, the ferrules at the bottom of the legs. That'll all be polished and recoated. Then I got to get all this felt off. And then stripping a piano, sometimes it's depending on the finish, and I did just get this laser that I've stripped a few pianos with, but since it had been refinished, the laser isn't very good at catalyzed finishes. It just turns, the laser just turns that finish into gum. It like this gummy substance and kind of melts it, and it doesn't blast it away like a traditional finish would. Oh, and this is the first pad saver I've had. I've had this sander for 6 years, and that's the first time I've had to replace that pad sander, or the sander pad, that pad saver there. So it was just kind of funny. It's like, man, I've had that for 6 years, and that's the first time I had to replace that. But back to the stripping. Sometimes it's faster just to sand it. Sometimes it's faster to use the chemicals. Obviously, if you've got the real chemicals, the methylene chloride, that's going to be your fastest way. But I don't want to get cancer when I'm 35. So, so this is just your run-of-the-mill stuff you can buy at the big box stores to get in all the coves and places that are really hard to sand. It would be impossible to sand those in the corners and the concave parts. And I'm going back to the action. Just kind of as I'm waiting for the stripper to do its thing. I can do a little here, do a little there. Get rid of all those balance rail punchings, front rail punchings, and then I'll polish the balance and front rail key pins. Sometimes I'll replace them if they're like rusted through, but if they're just have a little bit of corrosion on them, I'm able to polish them and they'll look like new. They'll be super slick to the touch. So I've scuffed up and cleaned this plate, and every once in a while I forget to hit the record button on the camera and I lose 2 hours worth of footage. But I scuff up the plate and clean it, and I'll spray it with a sealer coat and wait for that to dry. and then I'll sand it again. You'll see that later. But here I'm going with the chemical stripper in those hard to reach places. So actually there were 2 plates there. And you can see my very precise way of measuring the bronzing powder that I just kind of shake some in there until it looks good. And I did the other plate first. I had a Baldwin plate in there just to make sure I got the color right. And this is back to the Weber plate. And now I'm just filling in some of those worn edges and any nicks and dings in the wood. So I'll have a smooth surface to finish over. The bench top and one of the legs were probably the worst. Just needed a little bit more repairs. Some veneer was coming off. I had to glue that back down. And I'll sand all the filler smooth. And I'm going pretty fast here because there are so many parts to spray. I will upload it in 60 frames per second, so if you want to slow it down, you can put it in half speed and it'll still look normal. But all the case parts, this is the primer coat. So this is what 2 pianos worth of parts. I hang some of the parts that have 2 sides so I can spray both sides at the same time. And I ran out of those coat hanger racks, so some parts I just put them on carts. So now I'm sanding the primer coats smooth. You see I start to sand down to the wood, so I'll need some more coats on there. Just got to build it up thicker. So the goal here is to get rid of the wood grain. You don't want to see the wood grain in a high gloss finish. And it won't be super high gloss, but it'll be a satin finish, like a traditional American finish where you won't see the grain. So here's some more top coats. Yeah, a lot of this is sped up like 1,000 times. So it's, yeah, I think in total there was about 150 hours of video, and that doesn't include probably half a dozen times I forgot to hit the record button. So now I'm gonna put this the serial number on the plate, which is just a decal. And then once I get all the lettering painted over, then I'll give it a clear coat. And I've got a few different markers that are good for this. So now I've started the top coats on the case parts, and I'll kind of go back and forth. I'll spray a coat of the top coat and then wait about a half an hour and then spray another coat. So here I'm waiting a little bit to spray my next coat. Here's the next coat, and then I'll go and do something else. I'm cleaning up the damper heads. Spray another coat. And I've yanked the felts off, the old felts off the damper heads, and I'll sand those smooth and flat in preparation for the new damper felts. These go on top of the strings. This is when you play the key, it lifts off the string so the string can vibrate, and then when you lift off the key, the damper lowers down onto the string and stops the note. So I sent the keys off for new Keytops. The piano it was originally ivory, and then at some point there were plastics put on, but only the tops and not the fronts. So the tops actually looked okay, but the fronts looked super yellow and pretty gross. So that would have been super obvious. That's one of the things I just send out to do. So now I'm steaming out these bushings and the keys that hold on to the key pins, the front rail and the balance rail pins. So here's what this is underneath the key. You can see those kind of indentations in the key bushings that make the keys real sloppy and kind of really hard to control. A few of them were just missing. So now I'm picking the right size of felt, because there's different thicknesses you can use. You don't want it to be too tight and don't want it to be too loose. Spray another coat. Come back and do some more key bushings. Another coat. So this is a very very rarely do I get to just work on one piano and that's all I'm doing. So I had just over 5 weeks to completely restore this piano because you'll see later in the video we're moving. So I'm moving out of the shop. So while I'm doing this, I'm usually about a day a week, I'm taking pianos down to the new house and new shop, and so it was a stressful time. So, but yeah, it was nice just to focus on one thing and not, because normally I might have like one day a week to work on a project like this, where the rest of the week I'm doing tunings or moving pianos or selling a piano and delivering it or something like that. Now I'm replacing the key end felt. This is the felt that lifts the damper flange, and the old felt was pretty disintegrated and falling off. Yeah, as you watch the video, you'll see fewer and fewer pianos in the shop. So yeah, so I'll cut those felts. I'll trim them right up against the wood so it's nice and neat. Just chisel them away there. Now I'll size the new key bushings with some, it's a, I don't know what exactly it is, like fabric softener mixed with some silicone and some other chemicals, but it kind of expands the fibers in the felt, and it sizes it to this, these brass pieces I put in there are like 147 thousandths of an inch exactly. Oh, here's some video of the laser. And I love that sound. So I'm shining up these repetition flange screws, and the laser is very quick at that. So this is double speed now. But so I'm continuing to take all these old parts off, and I'll replace that sandpaper that's on there. The new parts have a little bit of a different profile. That's it's a better strength profile, so I just have to remove just a little bit of material from one of the rails, and I'll continue to clean that up. And while I'm here, I'll clean all the brass up and make it look shiny new. And yeah, now I'll go back into hyperdrive. So all the pedals and the casters, most of it's solid brass, with the exception of the casters. The wheels were solid brass, but the frame around them was steel. So I end up polishing the brass and painting the steel to a brass color so it matches. And most of the screws are solid brass. So there's a few hours of doing that. So you can see I paint those sides brass color, and then I'll go and hit the brass wheels again on this wheel, the deburring wheel, and then I spray everything in a clear coat. So this is the long hinge on the big lid on the top of the piano. So yeah, there's all the hardware, and I'll give it a clear coat. This is a specific type of clear. It's made for covering brass that's not supposed to yellow over time. And on the bottom I have all those screws that hold in the plate. I'll just turn those wheels a little bit so I can get them all covered. And the one thing you can see some tape on the pedal wire rods, those long pieces in the back. I don't finish over where the pedal rod goes through the bushing, because eventually that'll wear away and will start to squeak. So I just leave that polished. And now I want to put the legs back on the piano so I can work on the soundboard a little bit. So I'll rub the finish. I'll sand away the orange peel, because when you spray it, it doesn't spray completely flat. You can try to get it to lay out as flat as possible, but if you want it to look its best, you just got to sand it. So here we go. This black is actually coal dust from when we used to heat homes with coal furnaces. So that would stick to the wood. I see this on a lot of really old pianos. So you can see a lot of these cracks in the soundboard pop up after you get all the dust cleared away. So first I dried the board so the cracks would open up a bit. Now there's a little bit of separation in areas from the ribs, so I'm kind of climbing up under the piano, getting some glue in between the ribs and the soundboard, and I'm screwing the soundboard, you see those washers, back down to the ribs, so we can get good transduction of the frequencies from the string into the soundboard. There's a lot of different ways to repair a soundboard. I've done a lot of wood shimming. I've done a lot of this and that. What I found is asking a piano tuner or piano technician how do they repair a soundboard is kind of like asking an expecting mother of a boy, do you plan on getting them circumcised? It's like it doesn't matter what the mother says. She's going to piss off half the population. So I do what I think's best, and so I dry the board. I open the cracks up enough to get this epoxy putty. I kind of squish it into the top, and it doesn't go through all the way. It goes through maybe a third of the way. And then I'll flip the piano upside down and fill it with, it's a slow setting liquid epoxy. It's a little bit thicker, but not the thick epoxy. But I use a slow setting so it absorbs into the wood a little bit more than a quick setting epoxy. So this 24-hour epoxy, unlike the 5-minute epoxy, basically after you mix it together and apply it, then it's starting to cure. This stuff doesn't get tacky for like 2 hours. And it actually takes over a week for it to completely cure. But usually overnight it's hard. So So I'll just take a syringe and take the needle off and just apply it in there. So so the longer open time, it allows the air bubbles to escape. So it fills it completely. You're not left with air pockets in the crack. And it levels out real nice. So now that that's curing, I'm going to move on to the trap work since I have the piano upside down and in an easy, I don't have to crawl on my back and do all this, easy access. So I'll replace a lot of these felts and leathers that are 100 years old and need to be replaced. See my different scrapers there and just sanders. And this glue, it's the quick and thick. With felt, you really don't even have to clamp it. Sometimes, like the one that I clamped, I had like 5 pieces stacked on top of each other just to get the right thickness. But it basically suctions it to where it's not coming out again because no air. It doesn't allow any air back under it to let it up from the surface that you've glued it down to. So I use the quick and thick for a lot, and then I use the hide glue for some other things. If I want a longer open time, I'll use the hide glue. I think this what used to be called like carpenter's glue. They changed the name of it a few years back. This is the sostenuto trap work, the middle pedal. You can see in the top of the shot there's an old standard thermometer that you'd hang outside. My grandpa actually, his dad owned a standard gas station back when it was a full service station. They would come pump your gas and wash your windows and that sort of thing. So I found that in the barn and held on to it because I remember my grandpa talking about standard all the time. Now this is the shift pedal, the left pedal. And as I take these screws out, I clean those up too, just so they look nice before I put them back in. Okay, so the epoxy's cured. I've got the piano flipped back over. Forgot to press record, sorry. So I've sanded a lot of this epoxy putty back flush with the piano. And it matches the color pretty nicely. So it actually looks really nice. So that's why I like using that. Just felting the plate there. And I'll sand up to 320, maybe 400. And you couldn't even tell, but there's a serial number up toward the top register there. It says it's a Model T. And the serial number there. So this is a sanding sealer. I'll wait an hour or two for that to dry and give it a sanding. And then I'll spray it with a coat of satin. I don't like to do a high gloss on the soundboard. And then since I've got the piano in here, before I roll it out, I'll sand away all the orange peel. And on something like this, with all the the molding around the bottom and the curves, I think it took about 3.5 hours to sand all that back. Now I'm just going to clean up the bridges, and the bridges were in good shape. But I go ahead and I hit some thin CA glue just on every pin, just to make sure it's good and tight in there. Because if they're loose in there, that you can get what are called false beats, and it'll make the piano a little bit harder to tune. So I just make sure that those are secure. Now I'm getting the right height of the pin block, and before I put the plate back in. And I'm getting my measurements. Now I'm going to take a string and just lay it over the bridge and see what my down bearing's like. And right away I'm noticing I'm going to have to lower the plate a bit. But first I'm thinking, well, maybe if I tighten the screws, that'll lower the back of the plate a little bit more, which it didn't. So I just go ahead and put all the screws in to see if it changes anything. And I want to get a reading of the rest of the piano, so I'll take these other straps off. And overall, I have to lower the plate about 20 thousandths of an inch, which is kind of a lot. So the board has lost some crown, just being 100 years old, but it still has good resonance. How you check it before you rebuild, you just lift up on the damper and pluck the string. Not a bass string, but just a treble string. And you pluck it, and if there's good sustain, then you probably got something to work with. If you pluck it and it just goes doink, then something's wrong. like you heard in the bass strings at the beginning of the video. With the copper wound strings toward the lower register, over the years they corrode, and they just a lot of dust, and the coal dust gets in between those windings, and it just doesn't allow the string to vibrate. So that's what you were hearing at the beginning of the video, and it being so out of tune because the pin block was shot. So he had a couple people come out and try to tune it, but they just left saying they couldn't help him. And now that I've got the plate in the right spot, I'll begin to put the strings on. And by this time, I think I have all of the uprights moved out. When we moved up here, I say up and down, when we moved up to northern Indiana in the United States, we knew it would be temporary because we moved up for my wife's job. So we didn't know if it'd be 2 years, if it'd be 10 years, but the goal was always to move back down and be closer to family. And we had a couple kids, and a good opportunity arose for her, so we jumped on it. I told her there's pianos everywhere, so I can do this anywhere. It's not a big deal. I'm gluing in the new damper felts. And you can see in the back they're loading up grand pianos. Now I like to use the hide glue on this because it's a little bit longer open time, so I can, if I notice like one felt that's a couple dampers back, I can still move it. I still got time to do that. And I just got the new parts in, so I'll check those out. Oh well, that was a sample box, but these are the new repetitions. And they came, I had to switch out a flange on them because they're actually stock for a Baldwin, the repetition, but the flange was, it's a different profile on the inside of the flange, so I had to swap that out. And sand more case parts. Replace all those flanges and put those, the new whippings on. Whippings, repetitions, whatever you'd like to call them. And I'll cut some new sandpaper for under the hammer flanges. The rest of those on. And I'll begin the regulation process. So I'll replace this this felt on the action stop on the left side of the action because it was looking pretty sad. So I start with bedding the keyframe so the keys have a solid surface to rest on, so we don't get any weird knocks or weird bounces in the keystroke. And the steam, sometimes it's a good thing. If on older pianos, sometimes the hole on the bottom of the key gets just with age, it gets loose, and the key is called chucking, and it's just really wobbly. So the steam compresses that, or it swells up the wood around that a little bit more, and it helps that, but a lot of times too much, so you have to ease it back. So I'm able to adjust that friction level very precisely. Now okay. I've leveled the keys and set the key dip, how far the key travels downward, and polish up those brass capstans. Some more easing of the key bushings because I know it's winter and the humidity is a little bit lower, so I know in the summer it's going to swell back up a little bit, so I err on the loose side because I don't want anything to bind up in the summer when it gets more humid. So I'm just beginning to set a hammer blow distance, just a rough setting, then I'll refine it later. I noticed the let-off rail I had to move just a little bit. The new on the new parts, the jack tenders were like 2 millimeters longer than the old ones, and with that let-off rail um, being angled in such a way, it it changes the up and down adjustment. So I had less room to work with, so I had to move the whole rail up a little bit. Now I'm spacing the hammers to the strings. You want most notes, there's actually 3 strings per note. So you want each hammer to hit all 3 strings. You can see in the back there's one other customer's piano left. That after I get done with this piano, the movers are going to pick them up and take them to storage. Because my customer, he's renovating, so he can't accept the piano right when I'm done with it. Now I'm spacing the repetitions to the hammer knuckles. Put that back on. And the first time I moved this up, it wasn't quite enough. So I have to plug the screw holes where it's plugged in at and drill newer ones that are slightly lower. So it'll end up, so the whole rail will end up in a higher spot. And those let-off buttons, the individual buttons, are the thinnest you can buy. So it's not like I could replace them, because there are different sizes. But I could have, if they were the larger ones, I could have just bought the smaller ones and replaced them with the smaller ones. But these were in good shape, and they were already the smallest size I could use. So I'm going to set let off and drop. So when you depress the key, the hammer, it's called let off. It lets off right before the hammer hits the string, so the hammer doesn't block up against the string and cut off the note, rather than strike the string and come back away from the string. And I'll space the back checks. And set the back check where they need to be, back checks. And now I'm setting the repetition, the repetition spring. So when you let off the key, after you've pressed the key and you let the key off, the hammer is supposed to rise back up in order to allow the jack to go back under the knuckle, so you can play the key again. So you don't want the spring to be too loose, or you won't be able to repeat the note, and you don't want the spring to be too tight, or you'll get like a weird double bounce, or you'll be able to really feel that. And so now I'm going back to the dampers. Now that the damper felts, the glue is dried, you want each individual damper to lift straight in the air up, so not left or right. And these are very subtle adjustments, and after about 10 minutes your vision is going cross-eyed. And then you want to make sure that all dampers are lifting at the same time and evenly. So I'm going to get the pedal wire back on it so I can use my foot to lift all the dampers. I'll replace all the felts in there. It's kind of an old school method of those felts in the back of the pedals. They used to just wrap them through, thread them through, and then staple each end together. And I see that a lot on 100-year-old uprights. So this tray, the damper tray it's called, it has capstans or adjustable individual screws that you can really precisely calibrate to make sure all the dampers are lifting at the exact same time, which is actually an upgrade. I mean, you don't get that on most Steinways. So now I'm going to do, this is like the third chip tuning. I always do a couple chip tunings before I put the new damper felts on so the strings are at least up to tension. And I'm just doing some voicing. Getting all the rubber buttons back in the case parts. The various felts and hinges. It's kind of refreshing working on these other pianos because it's most of the time it's a Steinway or it's a Mason Hamlin or it's a Baldwin. So it's kind of nice getting in different pianos that you can just see a different look on how the piano is put together. Just different companies' recipes, I guess, of how they think it should be done. This is the music rack that I've broken down into 6 different parts. You can see all the space in the back now that the pianos are gone. Fitting the fall board back in. Putting the new decal back on. Put a clear coat over that. Another tuning. And these are just quick shop tunings because it'll go out of tune by tomorrow. And in the process of stringing and just throwing tools around, there will get some various bumps and bruises. So you got to know how to touch those up as you go. That was from when I put the plate back in it. And as I'm tuning, I'm just noticing some voicing things and just trying some different methods here. think the top section was a little bit weak, so I took that up with some just some lacquer. And the middle section was a little too strong, so I took that down by needling. Put the rest of the felts back on. Touch up that other customer's piano while I'm waiting for the glue to dry. And I'm noticing the wood of the fall board hits on the wood of the key slip, so I'm going to put some rubber bumpers on the cheek block too. So I mark those with chalk, so I have a mark and I know where to put the rubber bumper. And I very gently persuade those into the cheek block. Don't miss. That's better. And I just use lacquer on my plate finishes. I know a lot of people like the automotive finishes. This stuff's real easy to touch up and it looks great. So I did used to work for a company that used the automotive finishes, and the touch up of the plate, it didn't matter how strong the finish was. There's always going to be bumps and bruises in the process. So I like this because it's just so easy to touch up. So and almost forgot to put the bench back together. Test it out a little bit. And what a difference. Here's some list. And I love these new hammers. It's just a beautiful tone. Here's some Chopin. And you might be hearing some reverb. It's a big shop, and that's what it looks like when it's empty. So really the only thing left is this piano, that tool cabinet on the left, and the 3 rugs that it's sitting on, and that cart over there. So we're just getting a lot of feedback from the rest of the room. Isaac Albéniz, part of his Alhambra suite, La Vega. This is a section right in the middle. And you can play incredibly softly with this action and with the regulation. Very easy to control. This is also Albéniz, and I think it shows off, you want a difference between your melodic play and the accompaniment. So there's the melody that's kind of right in the same range of the accompaniment. So you want that change in voicing as you go up dynamic levels. Thanks for watching.